My mom smiled as she drove away, leaving me alone at a train station with one suitcase and nowhere to go. She believed she had finally gotten rid of me. But 20 minutes later, one man stepped off the train, looked straight at me, and everything changed. The moment my mom saw him, the color disappeared from her face. She looked like she had seen a ghost. That was the day every lie she had told me for 24 years started falling apart. My name is Alohan Hart, and until that day, I believed my father had abandoned me before I was even born. My mom, Maris, had repeated that story for as long as I could remember. She always said he didn't want me, never loved me, and chose to walk away without looking back. After hearing it my whole life, I never questioned it. Growing up with my mom was never easy. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. If something went wrong, she blamed me. If she had a bad day, she took it out on me. She reminded me over and over that I should be thankful she had raised me alone because no one else wanted me. The final argument started over something small, but it quickly became much worse. She shouted that she was tired of me living in her house and told me to pack my things. I thought she would calm down after a while, but she didn't. She drove me to the train station, placed my suitcase on the sidewalk, and told me to figure out my own life. Before getting back into her car, she looked at me without any sadness. Then she smiled, closed the door, and drove away, leaving me standing there alone, believing I had lost the only family I had left. I sat on a cold metal bench and watched people come and go. Families greeted each other with hugs. Friends laughed as they pulled their bags across the platform. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. I was the only one who felt completely lost. As I waited, old memories started coming back one after another. I remembered birthdays that never felt special. My mom always acted like buying me a small cake was some huge favor. If I asked for anything more, she would say I should stop expecting so much because I was already a burden. Whenever I brought home good grades, she barely looked at them. If another kid won an award, she would ask why I couldn't be more like them. It didn't matter how hard I worked. Someone else was always better. The hardest part was hearing the same words over and over. She never missed a chance to remind me that my father didn't want me. If I asked what he was like, she would tell me he walked away before I was born because he didn't want the responsibility of having a child. After hearing that for years, I stopped asking questions. I convinced myself that if my own father couldn't love me, maybe I wasn't worth loving. But sitting there alone, I started remembering little things that never made sense before. When I was around 8 years old, I found a birthday card in a kitchen drawer. My mom grabbed it from my hands before I could read it. She looked scared for a second, then told me it had been delivered to the wrong address. At the time, I believed her. A few years later, someone knocked on our front door. I saw a man standing outside holding flowers. Before I could answer, my mom pulled me into my bedroom and told me not to make a sound. We stayed there until the car outside drove away. She never explained who he was. There were other moments too. Letters disappeared before I could see them. Whenever I asked about my father's family, my mom changed the subject or became angry. For the first time in my life, I wondered if those memories meant something. Maybe the story I had believed since childhood wasn't the whole truth. Maybe there was a reason my mom never wanted me to ask questions. The sound of another train pulled me out of my thoughts. It slowed to a stop, and passengers began stepping onto the platform. I wasn't paying much attention until I noticed one man standing still instead of walking away with everyone else. He looked around for a few seconds, then his eyes landed on me. His expression changed immediately. He looked shocked, almost like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Instead of leaving, he walked straight toward me. I became nervous. I had never seen him before, and I tightened my grip on my suitcase. When he stopped a few feet away, he smiled gently and said, "Ellie." My heart skipped a beat. Nobody had called me that in years. It was a nickname I barely remembered from when I was very young. My mom never used it. No friends knew about it either. I stared at him without saying a word. His eyes dropped to the small silver necklace around my neck. It had been with me for as long as I could remember. "You still have it," he said quietly. "I hoped you never lost it." I instinctively touched the necklace. "How do you know about this?" I asked. His eyes filled with emotion. For a moment, he couldn't answer. Finally, he took a slow breath. "My name is Callum Voss," he said. "I've been looking for you for almost 24 years. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I shook my head. "You must have the wrong person." He slowly reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to me carefully. It showed a much younger man holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby was wearing the same silver necklace hanging around my neck. "I don't have the wrong person," he said softly. You're my daughter, Eloan. I've never stopped searching for you. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. There has to be some mistake, I whispered. Callum slowly sat down on the bench across from me. He didn't try to rush me or force me to believe him. I know this is hard to hear, he said. If someone had told me this was happening, I wouldn't have believed it either. He reached into a leather bag and carefully placed a thick folder on the bench between us. I never abandoned you, Eloan. He opened the folder and spread out the papers one by one. The first pages were copies of letters, all addressed to my mother. Every one of them had been returned unopened. Then he showed me court documents with dates going back more than 20 years. He had filed requests to find me, but each search ended the same way. My mother had moved before anyone could locate her. When your mother found out she was pregnant, we argued, he explained. A few days later, she disappeared. She changed her phone number, left the city, and cut off everyone who knew where she had gone. He paused before continuing. I hired private investigators more than once. Every time they found a lead, it ended with another move. It was like someone wanted to erase every trace of you. I looked through more papers. There were receipts, legal records, and reports from investigators. Everything was organized by year. I kept every document because I believed that one day I would find you, he said quietly. And when that day came, I wanted you to know I never gave up. I felt my chest tighten. Everything my mother had told me suddenly seemed uncertain. If these papers were real, then she hadn't been protecting me from a man who walked away. She had been hiding me from a man who spent almost my entire life trying to bring me home. I looked at Callum, then back at the folder. For the first time, I realized I didn't know which part of my childhood had been real and which part had been built on a lie. I was still trying to understand everything when I heard the sound of tires outside the station. A familiar car pulled into the parking area. My stomach tightened. It was my mother's car. She got out and walked toward the entrance with the same confident look she always had. I couldn't understand why she had come back. Maybe she expected to find me crying and begging her to take me home. Then she saw who was standing beside me. She stopped so suddenly that people walking behind her had to move around her. Her face turned pale. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Callum looked at her calmly, almost as if he had imagined this moment 1,000 times. "Hello, Maris," he said. Hearing him say her name made something change in her expression. She looked frightened instead of angry. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "I think you already know why I'm here." She looked at me. "Eloan, come here," she said quickly. "We're leaving." I didn't move. She repeated my name, this time more firmly, but my feet stayed where they were. Callum didn't raise his voice. "You've had 24 years to tell her the truth." "There is nothing to tell," my mother answered. He looked directly into her eyes. "Then why did you spend 24 years making sure I could never find my own daughter?" My mother had an answer for everything. She could argue with anyone and always found a way to make herself look right. This time, she said nothing. She looked around the station as if searching for a way to escape. I watched her closely. For the first time in my life, I saw fear instead of confidence. She knew the papers were real. She knew I had seen them. She knew the story she had repeated since I was a child was beginning to fall apart. I wanted her to deny everything so I could understand what was happening, but the words never came. The silence between them said more than any argument could. At that moment, I realized something I never thought possible. My mother wasn't afraid of losing an argument. She was afraid of losing the lie that had controlled my entire life. My mother finally found her voice. "He's trying to confuse you," she said as she looked at me. "Don't believe anything he says." Callum didn't argue with her. He simply opened another section of the folder and handed it to me. Inside were bank records with my mother's name on them. Every month, the same amount of money had been deposited into the account for years. "I sent support from the day I learned you had been born," Callum said quietly. "The court approved it after I proved I was your father. The money was accepted every single month." I looked at my mother. She had always told me we struggled because my father refused to help us. Now I was holding proof that he had never stopped helping. Callum showed me another envelope filled with copies of birthday cards and handwritten letters. Each one had a different date. Some wished me luck on my first day of school. Others hoped I was healthy, happy, and safe. "I knew you might never read them," he said. "But I wrote them anyway. It made me feel closer to you." I slowly turned the pages. There was a letter for every birthday I had missed with him. There were Christmas cards. There were graduation wishes written years before I even finished high school. Then he placed several court papers in front of me. "They're all requests to spend time with you," he explained. I asked for visits again and again. Every case ended the same way because your mother disappeared before the process could move forward. I couldn't breathe properly. I wasn't only thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about everything that could have been different. There could have been birthday dinners, weekend visits, school events, simple conversations. Instead, I grew up believing I had been rejected. I looked at my mother, hoping she would finally explain why she had done this. She lowered her eyes and stayed silent. That silence hurt more than any words ever could. Being left at the train station was painful. But realizing my entire childhood had been built around choices someone else made for me was a wound much deeper than I ever imagined. After everything that happened at the station, Callum asked if I would come with him for a while. He said I didn't have to make any big decisions that day. He only wanted to show me something. I quietly agreed. His house was warm and peaceful. It didn't feel strange or uncomfortable. It felt like a place where people cared about each other. He led me into a small room near the front of the house. Against one wall stood a bookshelf filled with children's stories, puzzles, and old photo albums. In the corner was a desk with art supplies that had never been opened. I kept hoping I'd find you while you were still young, he said. Every year I thought, maybe this will be the year. I couldn't find the right words. A little later, I met his older sister, Brielle. The moment she saw me, tears filled her eyes. She hugged me gently and said she had wondered for years what I looked like and whether I was doing okay. During dinner, they shared stories about grandparents, cousins, holiday trips, and family traditions. They spoke about people who had known my name but never had the chance to meet me. I listened quietly, realizing I should have been part of those memories. There was an empty space in every story, and that space was me. Nobody blamed me for what had happened. Nobody asked difficult questions. They simply welcomed me as if they had been waiting all this time. That kindness made the truth even harder to accept. I wasn't grieving a person I had just met. I was grieving birthdays, holidays, conversations, and years that could never be lived again because someone else had decided I didn't deserve to know this family. A few days later, my mother asked to meet us at the office of the lawyer who had handled many of the old court papers. She insisted she could explain everything if we would just listen. I agreed because I wanted answers, not another argument. She walked into the room looking tired. The confidence she always carried was gone. She started speaking before anyone else could. I did what I thought was best, she said. I was trying to protect my daughter. The lawyer quietly opened a file from years ago. There are a few things you should explain first, he said. He placed several signed documents on the table. They showed that my mother had refused mediation more than once. She had ignored notices from the court and given false information about where she was living. Every decision made it harder for Callum to find us. Then another paper was placed in front of me. It was a written statement from many years earlier. My mother had claimed that Callum wanted nothing to do with me. But attached to it were records proving he had already filed legal requests asking to be part of my life before she made that statement. The dates could not be argued with. She lowered her head. After a long silence, she finally admitted the truth. She said she was afraid that if Callum stayed in my life, I would love him more than her. She also admitted that the monthly support helped her keep control of everything without sharing any decisions with him. Hearing those words hurt more than I expected. This had never been about protecting me. It had been about keeping control. Soon, relatives from both sides of the family learned what had really happened. People who had believed my mother's story for years began calling Callum to apologize. Others stopped defending her after seeing the documents for themselves. The version of herself she had spent years protecting disappeared in just a few days. She didn't lose it because someone lied about her. She lost it because the truth finally reached the people who had only heard one side of the story for far too long. When everything was finally out in the open, I expected to feel anger stronger than anything I had ever known. Instead, I felt tired. I looked at my mother one last time before leaving the lawyer's office. She tried to stop me. "Please don't walk away," she said. "We can fix this." I stood there for a moment, searching for something to say. There had been a time when I would have believed every promise she made. That time was gone. "You had years to tell me the truth," I said quietly. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I turned around and walked out with Callum. For the first time in my life, I wasn't following someone else's decisions. I was choosing my own path. The weeks that followed were strange. Callum and I were still getting to know each other. We talked for hours about ordinary things. He wanted to hear about my favorite books, my job, my childhood dreams, and everything he had missed. He never tried to make up for the lost years with expensive gifts or grand promises. He simply showed up. If he said he would call, he called. If we planned dinner together, he was there on time. Little by little, trust replaced the emptiness I had carried for so long. My mother reached out several times. Sometimes she left messages asking for another chance. Other times she acted as if none of this had been her fault. I didn't answer with anger. I didn't argue. I didn't try to punish her. I simply kept living my life without letting her control it anymore. That choice changed everything. She could no longer tell me what to believe. She could no longer decide who I loved or who I spoke to. The truth had broken the walls she spent years building around me. Looking back, I realized revenge was never about making her suffer. The greatest consequence she faced was watching me build the honest relationship she spent years trying to destroy. She lost the power she had always held over my life, and nothing hurt her more than seeing that I no longer needed her permission to be happy. Several months have passed since the day my mother left me at that train station with one suitcase. Sometimes I think about how different my life could have been if she had never driven away that morning. I believed everything was falling apart, but that painful moment became the beginning of something I never thought I would have. Life isn't perfect now, but it's honest. Callum and I still have years of memories to make up for. We can't change the past, but we refuse to let it steal any more of our future. We celebrate birthdays together, share Sunday dinners, and laugh about small things that most families take for granted. Those simple moments mean more to me than anything money could buy. I don't carry hate anymore. Holding on to it would only keep me tied to the life I left behind. My mother made her choices, and she has to live with them. I don't wish bad things for her, but I no longer allow her decisions to shape my future. The biggest lesson I learned is that the truth always finds its way out, even if it takes years. For most of my life, I believed I wasn't wanted. I blamed myself for a story that was never true. Now I know I was loved all along. Someone searched for me through every setback and never stopped hoping we would meet again. When I remember that train station, I no longer think about being abandoned. I think about the moment my real life finally began. I didn't get revenge by hurting the person who lied to me. I got something far better. I found the father I was told never cared, the family I was never allowed to know, and the peace that comes from finally living without fear, guilt, or lies. That was the day I truly found my way home.